Good morning to everyone. This morning I want to welcome you back to our series titled Troubled Hearts. There we go, Troubled Hearts. We've been looking at this the last 3 weeks, and if you haven't caught the first parts of the series, I encourage you to go on Facebook or YouTube to catch the first parts as we're digging into the things that happen inside of us, the things that happen in our hearts and the emotions that we feel in every season of life, and we're wanting to surrender those things and allow God to have control over our hearts. So today, we're going to start off by doing something that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I don't believe in age shaming, so it's okay to say you're a little bit more experienced in life than others. It's perfectly okay. And so just by raising your hand, how many of you ever used AOL Messenger? AOL Messenger? Yeah, AOL Messenger was pretty cool. It was back in the day. It was like texting, but with your computer. And it was cool because you would just connect with people and communicate. And several years later, there was another social media kind of started taking off, and there was this social media platform called High Five. Anyone use High Five? Yeah? All right, I'm doing. Oh, there's two of us? All right, High Five. All right, awesome. Now, High Five was kind of the start of now putting pictures out there and identifying yourself as whatever you wanted to identify, like kind of painting this picture of who you were. And then MySpace came along. Any MySpace users? Yeah, a couple of you? All right. Now, MySpace was very, very annoying for the younger people in the room because you would go on someone's page and there would be music, and it was almost impossible to turn it off. And so it was very, very disturbing and annoying. And then several years later, Instagram came out. Any Instagram users? A couple of you? All right. So Instagram is probably the worst because Instagram does a very, very good job. I guess we do a very good job because we use Instagram of portraying ourselves in a certain light. And so when I first started using Instagram and seeing my friends on Instagram and seeing where they were in the world and what they were doing in the world, it kind of stoked all these emotions inside of me. One specifically called envy, because I would see all the things that they were doing, the things they had, the things they were achieving. And I'm like, man, I wish I was doing all that stuff. And then I would start doing some stuff, and I would just do stuff so I could take a picture of it and put it on Instagram. So then hopefully somebody would then see my pictures on Instagram and be jealous of me. That was like the top objective in my life, would just be envious or envied on Instagram. And so when things weren't going for someone, I wouldn't necessarily get happy or celebrate, but I would get happy but not celebrate. And it was something weird, right? I felt like just getting off social media because I'm like, what's the purpose of this if I'm just going on here and seeing what other people are doing and then seeing the things that I'm not doing and then getting jealous of the people that are doing supposedly good things and supposedly have happy lives and good lives, that have better cars than me, better clothes than me, better, other stuff than me, not a better family than me, but everything else looked better. And I said, I can't be on these platforms if that becomes my objective. And so at some point in the last couple of years, I just shut it down. I just turned it off. And that lasted a couple of hours, and then I turned it back on. Because there's something inside of us, right? We want to see what other people are doing, and at the same time, we kind of chase after what other people are doing, but we don't really feel content once we've achieved it. Once we've received it, once we obtained it, once we've been awarded, it's like that was it. I thought there was something more to having a better car, having a better house, having a better job, making more money. I thought there was more to getting that promotion. And it's like the more we chase after these things, the emptier we are inside. It's like an endless pursuit of nothing. And so today, we're going to talk a little bit about this and what it looks like in our life, and more importantly, how we can kind of combat and face envy and live free of it. So there's a text we're going to look at today that will circle back to the beginning of where we're at and what we're talking about. It's Matthew chapter 15, verse 17, where Jesus puts it so plainly and so easy to read and understand. You don't need to get a theology degree to understand this or read Hebrew. It's very, very easy. It says, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then comes out of your body? Like, everyone knows that. Like, babies know this. They know that something comes into their mouth and then they cry because, you got it? So babies wear diapers, hopefully. and they know when that diaper's full, and so they let you know. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes out of the stomach and then goes down out of the body? Like, yeah, we get it, Jesus. Everyone knows that. So he goes on, he says, but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from where? From your heart. And these things defile you. And so what Jesus is making very plain and very simple, he's saying what comes into your body is not going to defile you. It's not going to make you a bad person. Those things don't make you a bad person. But what comes out of your heart kind of shows people and yourself who you are. Many times we say, well, I don't know where that came from. Like, I don't know how that happened. I don't know where that idea came from. I'll tell you where it came from your heart. Those things just don't pop out of nowhere. They're just not created in the moment. They're not fabricated in that millisecond. These things, these ideas, these feelings, these words are coming from our hearts. And what comes out of our heart, yes, what's coming from our heart through our mouth is what can defile me. What kind of shows what's inside of me, what I'm made of and who I am. It's not the exterior, it's not my clothing, it's not the things I achieve or accomplish. It's what's coming out of our hearts. And so when our hearts are rotten, or when they're corrupted, when it's defiled, it stinks. And it's hard to hide something that smells bad. Just like a diaper. You can put it in 15 bags. Still gonna smell. That's what Jesus is saying. And he goes on, he says, for out of the heart comes evil thoughts. It's out of my heart, out of your hearts that come evil thoughts. The evil is not just out there, the evil is also in here, right? Sidebar, many times we wrestle with a concept of why God allows bad things to happen. Like, how could God allow this fire to happen in Maui? How could God allow so many wars to happen throughout the world? How could God allow so many children to go hungry? How could God allow so much corruption and so much oppression to happen throughout the history of mankind? And we say, if God were loving and he were just, he would then eliminate all that's evil. And I've wrestled with that concept many times. I've thought about that many times. I've gotten frustrated with God many times. I'm like, God, how could you allow this to happen? How could you allow this to happen to this good person, this good group, that church, that individual, that family, that business? God, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you prevent it? And so this is where it kind of hits home. That if I were to ask God to eliminate every single thing that's evil, he would also have to eliminate my heart. Because if he allows my heart to continue, but he eliminates every other heart, sooner or later, we're going to end up in the same position that we are today, asking God to remove the evil out there. We have to remember that the evil's not only out there, it's also in here. It's also in here. And so maybe we need to shift in what we ask God to do. For God not only to deal with the evil out there, but maybe more importantly, for God to deal with the evil that's in here. And so he says, for out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. We said in Mark chapter 7, the list is similar, but maybe a little bit different, where Mark says greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires. He says envy. Envy comes from our hearts. And it's one of the things that contaminates our hearts and defiles our hearts. You see, Jesus said, these are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. You see, if my focus is rules, traditions, if my focus is a structure or a certain way of doing things, then I'm going to end up in the same place over and over and over again. And that's not the worst part. The worst part is I will deal with a troubled heart throughout my entire life. I will be able to achieve great things. I will be able to make a lot of money. I'll have the house I always wanted, the car. I'll be able to travel the world. But what will travel with me is a troubled heart. I can't take vacations from a troubled heart. I can't put a troubled heart to rest. I can't turn off the troubled heart, because even when I close my eyes, my heart reminds me of the evil that's inside of me. And so Jesus wanted to give people a new start, a fresh start, but a new life as well. One with a whole heart, a heart like his, a heart full of peace, joy, and love. So, as followers of Jesus, we need to learn how to monitor our hearts. And probably as parents, the best lesson we can pass on to our children, the best teaching we can pass on, is how we can show them to monitor their own hearts. How we can teach them to allow Jesus to deal with their emotions and give them the tools or just the peace, the acknowledgement that Jesus is present, he's with me, he wants to help me, he doesn't judge me or push me away when I break the rules or I forget the rules or I live outside the rules. Jesus is still coming after me. He wants to live with me, be with me no matter what. And even when the rest of the world pushes me away and pushes me down, Jesus is right there next to me. Probably the best lesson that our teenagers can learn is that as they're discovering who they are and as they're dreaming about their life in the present or future, that there's this guy called Jesus that wants to dream with them. There's someone called Jesus that sees them and sees directly into their hearts. If anyone knows what a teenager is, it's Jesus, because he knows exactly the thoughts in our minds and the feelings in our hearts. That we don't have to go through those difficult years alone, that we have this friend called Jesus that will go with me wherever I go, that he will give me the courage to be the person he designed me to be, and that no matter what I face, whether inside of my heart or home or school or world, that Jesus will never abandon me. Man, if the next generation just knew that Jesus was that friend, if Jesus was that interested and that invested in every single teenager in the world today. You see, Jesus is saying it's not the rules that defile you, it's what's inside of your heart that messes you up. And he says, I want to clean it up for you. You don't have to do it. You don't know how to do it. But I am an expert in heart operations. Just let me handle it. Are we willing to let him do that today with envy? Envy. Envy usually pops up in my life just a couple of times a year. The rest of the year, I'm pretty good. I'm joking. Usually during football season is when envy kind of creeps in, right? And I'll see other teams doing well. And there's usually teams that always do well, right? Right? Oh, wow, a lot of Jaguars fans. And I'll get a little bit envious. There's one team in particular that I get really envious about when they start winning, because I have a lot of friends that are fans of this one team. And probably one of my closest friends growing up, his name is also Ruben. He's a pretty big Dallas Cowboys fan. And so throughout the football season, I will be in a group chat and we'll go back and forth every Sunday about who won, who lost. But I will especially get excited, regardless of whether my team won or lost. If his team lost, I'm good. Like, that's enough to push me through the entire week. Like, that will give me enough fuel to sit down and prep a sermon like nothing else. Now, when his team wins, it's like somebody killed my mom, right? Like the world's over, the world's coming to an end, and I'll just hear him gloating and bloating about his team, and I have to kind of eat it throughout the entire week, and I'll just have this envy inside of me saying, why can't my team be like that? And it never is. And so that's when I deal with it, right? And that's kind of joking around with something, but kind of maybe reality for a lot of us. When others fail, there's kind of this joy or this happiness that kicks in. It not only applies to sports, but it can also apply to that one neighbor, right? That one neighbor that we kind of don't get along with, the one neighbor that complains to the HOA all the time, the one neighbor that kind of makes our life impossible. If we know that they're not doing too well, it's like we're a little bit happier inside, right? The same thing with a coworker, with that mother-in-law, or with that sister-in-law or brother-in-law. You know who that person is your life when they're doing well. It seems like something's eating you up inside when they're not doing too great. It's like you got an extra, bounce to your step all of a sudden, right? I don't know where that comes from. It's in all of us. At different degrees, it's in all of us. Some of us choose to post it on social media. Some of it keep it to ourselves. But it's in all of us. We have this desire, this envy. When we see things that we don't have and we see that other people have them, we want them. And when they're not doing too great, and then we're a little bit happier about life. And that can trouble our heart. Because envy has the power to destroy not only your own heart, it has the power to destroy every single relationship you're in. And if you don't believe me, just start showing your envy to every person that's close to you and let me know what happens in just 1 week. Envy has the potential to mess us up and mess up every good thing that's in life, every good relationship, every good job, every good scenario, every good feeling, every good experience. Envy has the power to corrupt it from the inside out and strip it away from us. And so what does the Bible have to say about any of this? There's some powerful words that we find in Ecclesiastes. That's one of the hardest books in the Bible for me to pronounce. I've had to practice that. It's so much easier in Spanish, but in English it's one of those challenging ones. All right. But we're not going to go there yet. I'm prepping you. James chapter 3, verse 16 says, for where you have what? Wherever envy creeps into your heart or your life, and selfish ambition, just another way of saying kind of the same thing, this is the result. There you find disorder and every evil practice. It's interesting, he doesn't say some evil practices. He doesn't say a list of evil practices that show up when envy and selfish ambition are present. He says every single evil practice. In other words, the thing that can corrupt us the most, the thing that can lead us away from God and each other the most is envy. And so James is letting us know, is like, hey, watch out. If you're going to guard your heart, protect your heart, if you want to have a heart like God's, then envy and selfish ambition, you have to watch out for these. It doesn't say get rid of them. It doesn't say overcome them. It just says you have to watch out for these. Proverbs chapter 14 says, a heart of peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Envy rots the bones. So envy is like pursuing something that we can't obtain. It's like going after something that is endless or is somewhere out there that's always ahead of us. It's always pushing us forward, but sometimes we don't even know why we're pushing forward, and we strive and we strive and we strive for something that we never obtain. I read a good article about this in a Psychology Today, and I wanted to share some of the principles I found there from a doctor called Diana Hill, and she shares kind of things that happen when we go after unhealthy striving, when we allow envy and the selfish ambition to take over our hearts. And I wrote 3 things down that kind of happen. We start doing more, but never feels like you're doing enough. You've added more things to your schedule. You put more things on your plate at work or at home or at church, wherever. You're doing more, but it never feels like it's enough. It always feels like you got to do one more thing, one more activity, one more kids activity, one more school thing, one more work thing, just one more thing at home, and it's never enough. Competing with people who don't know you're competing with them. Like one time, I was a teenager, not an adult, teenager, just gotten my license. My dad had lent me his Toyota Corolla, this green-colored Toyota Corolla. Everyone saw it was a Toyota Corolla and it was green, but I would just see a Ferrari bright apple, right? That's for me. Like 4th, 5th day out, I'm out on the Toyota Corolla by myself, and I'm stopped at I'm at a red light. I look over, and there's this bright red Camaro. And in my head, I have a Ferrari, he has a Camaro. So I'm like, I'm sure that if I move quick enough with this car, I can beat a Camaro. And so I kind of mentalized and prepped myself for what I needed to do, because the Toyota Corolla was not just a green Toyota Corolla, it was also stick shift. I had an advantage over the Camaro. So I said, if I'm able to get to 3rd gear before he gets to 2nd gear, I'm gone. Sure enough, I put the car in neutral. I was focused on the stoplight. As soon as it turned green, I put 1st gear in. I took off, put 2nd gear, 3rd gear, and I was off. I felt like I was at Le Mans or some Formula 1 race. I was just off, focused. I knew there was cameras on me somewhere, and I felt important for a couple of split seconds. Now, when I looked through my mirror to see where the Camaro was, I realized that the Camaro had made a right turn a couple of blocks ago. I was competing with someone that I didn't even know I was competing with. And many times we do that. We're competing with people that don't even know we're competing with them. We'll see a picture online, or we'll hear a story, we'll hear a promotion, we'll hear somebody getting a grade, we'll hear about someone getting accepted to a certain high school or college, and we're trying to compete against someone that's not even in the same race with us. Unhealthy striving. Last one is neglecting self and relationships to get ahead in areas that don't even matter to you. Right? We'll be in the rat race of putting more hours in at work. We'll be in the rat race of improving our spaces, of improving our car, improving, our profile, improving our resume, improving so many things that we think will give us purpose and value. But at the end of the day, we realize that they don't matter at all. And we've sacrificed ourselves, and we've sacrificed our relationships, our families, for nothing. For nothing. So I have a cure. I have a remedy for you, really simple, just 2 words. You can take it home today, you can practice it today, and it'll all be better. You ready? I'll take your nonverbal approval. Oh, there was one more, but it's insignificant at this point. Oh, here we go. This is memorable, right? Just stop it. Stop being envious. Stop, trying to achieve something that's not achievable. Stop going after money. Stop going after extra hours. Stop going from that promotion. Stop trying to do more. Just stop. And as easy as this may sound, it's not so easy. Because if we had the desire or the power to stop it, we still wouldn't be able to stop it. I wish that was it. I wish that was all there was to kind of deal with envy. Just stop it today and we'll be good tomorrow, right? Let's just turn that switch off and move on in life, but we can't. Because envy creeps up in every single area of our hearts, every single relationship, every single moment, every single post, every single thing we see around us. Envy just finds a way to creep into our hearts, and if we wanted to stop it, we probably couldn't. So maybe it's not so much about stopping it, but more about managing it, of managing the tension of those emotions, those feelings, those situations in life, acknowledging that envy is creeping in and choosing a different direction, choosing a different way, choosing to have a healthy heart and not a troubled heart. And so this is where Solomon pops in with Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 4 and on. It says, "And I saw that all work, all toil, and all achievement spring from one person's what? Envy." Every desire that we have and every work that we do, every desire to achieve something, he says, springs from one person's envy of another. It's coming from our hearts. It's coming from deep within us. This desire to have more, be better, do better, it's coming from inside of us. And he continues and says, this too is meaningless. A chasing after what? After the wind. Have you ever chased the wind before? Maybe not so much as an adult, but maybe as a child. With all the kids in the room, have you chased the wind before? Like I asked my kids this morning, what does it mean to chase after the wind? They kind of got frozen, what are you talking about, Dad? One of my kids said, well, that's impossible. Okay. The other one just said, well, keep chasing it. I'm like, okay, what happens if you keep chasing the wind? He said, I'm going to get tired. I'm going to start using kids' theology because it's so much easier to understand. When we pursue work and achievement that's coming from envy of another person, he's telling us this is meaningless because it's like chasing after something that we can never obtain. It's like trying to trap the wind in our hands or trying to trap the wind in any type of container. We can't trap the wind. We can't grab the wind. We can't control wind. All we can do with wind is feel its effect. We know when it's present. We know it's not, but we can't control it. We can't box it in. We can't manage it. All we can do is kind of feel the effects of it. And so Solomon is saying, if you allow envy to have control over your heart, you're going to be chasing after the wind. And this is so meaningless because you can convince yourself in a moment that it can be obtained, that it can be done, that it will be purposeful. But at the end of your life, you'll realize that the wind was never obtainable. It's like an endless game. Not like baseball, because they changed the rules now, and then, a pitcher has a certain clock that he has to pitch to, and it's no longer an endless game. Now it has an end, right? Maybe more like cricket, for those of you that don't know about cricket. It's like something that never, ever ends, that can go on forever and ever and ever and ever. When we allow envy to take over, there's no end. You're going to get to one point in life that you always wanted to get to, and you're going to realize that there must be something more because you're still feeling something empty inside. And then you'll move on to the next thing and achieve that and still feel empty inside. And you'll go from one thing to another and to another. Maybe you're saying, well, if I had just enough money, if I had $1 million in the bank, if I had $100 million in the bank, if I had $1 billion in my bank account. I heard a podcast about 2 weeks ago from Andy Stanley. It's a leadership podcast, it's an amazing podcast. If anyone hit 40 or just past 40 years old, come talk to me afterward. I'll share the podcast with you. You have to hear it. It's just a little bit depressing, but it's depressing enough. I'll just leave it at that. And so on that podcast, the person being interviewed shares a story about a lady that has her own business in Wall Street. She invests money for many, many people. In the last 3 years, she has hit the 1 billion mark 3 years in a row. $1 billion 3 years in a row. And so the person sharing the story says that he approached her. They're having this conversation, and he says, wow, you've done some amazing things. You're at the top of your game. You're at the top of Wall Street. $1 billion winnings 3 years in a row. What does it feel like? She looked at him and said, well, it's okay. Hey, what do you mean it's okay? You hit $1 billion earnings 3 years in a row. You must feel more than okay. You're at the top of the game. You're doing something that nobody else is doing. You must know something that nobody else knows. So you must feel excited. You must feel happy. You might feel this fulfillment. He's like, well, not really. So he's like, well, how are things at home with your husband, your kids? I'm like, they're okay. I have to work a lot of hours, and so by the time I get home, my kids are either doing their homework or they're sleeping, and my husband, he works too, and so he has things, and so we make time, on the weekend to spend a little bit of time together, and then we're back to the grind. And as I'm hearing this story, I'm thinking, $1 billion 3 years in a row, if somebody give me $1 billion, I want to think I would be a little bit happier. Like at least half a smile. But apparently the people that are making that amount of money is not bringing any more happiness or joy to their life. Yes, they have an ability to do more things that we probably would never do, but it's not bringing anything new to the table that you and I don't experience on a daily basis. You see, Solomon wrote this thousands of years ago, and it's still hitting home. That going after things that are born in our heart from envy is just like chasing the wind. We try to grab it, we try to achieve it, we try to prove it, but it still feels empty. And he goes on and says, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. So now he goes to the other extreme that's saying, just because you don't do anything, it doesn't mean that the opposite is going to happen. Like if you stay home and you don't work and you don't move forward in life, it's not going to bring anything different from chasing after the wind. It's actually the same destination. And so there's some truth somewhere in the middle. He says, better one handful with what? Better one handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. So think about it right now. Would you rather have $10,000 in one hand or $10,000 potentially in the future in both hands? I asked my kids that this morning. One of them said 1, the other one said 2. That's pretty accurate to all of us. Depending what it is, we're going to be content with 1. On other things, we're going to chase after with 2 empty hands. So where are you at today? Are you content with 1 handful in tranquility, or are you chasing with 2 empty hands? Are you chasing the wind with 2 empty hands? I think in different seasons of life, in different moments of life, we're going to be in either camp. There are going to be some moments in life where God's going to humble us and bring us to a point where 1 handful is enough, where 1 handful is all that we need. When we have recognized that Jesus is all we have and all we need, 1 handful is more than enough. We're going to praise God for the 1 handful and for all the other problems that envy brings to be removed from our life. But there's going to be other seasons and moments of our life. There's parts of our hearts that still doesn't trust God to the point that we should trust Him. There's some areas in your life that it's hard to trust God. And we say, if I don't do this my way, if I don't make my plan, if I don't try harder, if I don't show up more, then it won't get done. I have to do more. And we try to justify our actions and our works to prove to God and others that unless we do it our way, unless we do more of it, unless we don't stop, then it will never get done. So church, that's chasing after the wind. There's no end in sight. You can make more money, you can work more hours, you can get a better job, you can get your own job, your own business, you can build your own house, have the car of your dreams, and still be chasing after the wind. So he goes kind of into a story to bring it all home. He says he saw something meaningless under the sun. Before we get into that story, I'm going to break it down for us so we can apply it and maybe put it into practice this week. Before we get to that point, I want to just remind you of one text that kind of summarizes it all. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, above all else, guard your heart. Above everything else. So above providing for your family or taking care of your kids, above showing up to work and being a good professional, above your relationships and taking care of the people close to you, guard your heart. Because if you guard your heart, everything you do will flow from it. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30 says, a tranquil heart, a peaceful heart gives life to the flesh, as we read earlier. Do you want life flowing through your heart today? Not just for you, but for all those people that you're in relationships with. Do you rather bring life to their life, or do you rather bring envy to the table? Do you rather celebrate when they're celebrating, or whether you partially celebrate and kind of soak in the corner? Like, what type of person do we want to become, and what kind of heart do we want to have? So if we want to follow Jesus, and if we want to be someone that loves God and loves people, then we have to start with our own hearts, because Proverbs is telling us that everything we do will flow from it. Both good and bad, both pretty and ugly, everything will flow from our hearts. So here's the practical part. First thing we can do today to protect our hearts is to practice gratitude. Practice gratitude. If you're not doing this already, it's simple practice you can do every single day before you go to bed. Instead of kind of mindless scrolling on your phone, beginning to the last intent to envy of the day, instead of doing that, turn the phone off, grab a notepad, write down 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day. If you haven't done this before and this is going to be your first try doing this, it's going to be tough at first, because you're going to think about everything that happened that day, and most likely, unless we guard our hearts and train our minds, the first things that are going to pop to our head is the bad things that happened that day. And so if we want to guard our hearts, it doesn't happen overnight. It's practice, and it's habit, and it's a discipline. And so every day, before you go into bed, say, God, help me remember 3 good things that I can be grateful for today. And if you don't have 3 things to be grateful for, talk to someone that loves you. They will be able to see the good things in your life that maybe you don't see right now. All right? Very easy practice. Every day, Write down 3 things you're grateful for. And I think that the more we do this, the more we do this practice, the more we train our mind to become positive, not only in our own lives, but also in other people's lives. And so this will naturally lead us to point 2. Everyone starts with P because I'm a pastor. All right? So number 2, praise every achievement. Praise every achievement. Whether you've achieved something, you should celebrate it. You should bring friends and family together, whether it's a birthday, whether it's a promotion, whether it's something good that happened in your life. You should get together and celebrate it. But not just the good things that happen in your life. You should celebrate when something good happens in someone else's life. Whether it's a neighbor, coworker, or family member, whether they got the job you wanted or the promotion you wanted, you should celebrate it. Because the more we celebrate the good things other people are doing, the more we're releasing the power of envy from our hearts, and we live freely. Because I can celebrate their victories like they were my victories, because I know that God is taking care of me, and at some point I will have something worth celebrating to that degree. You see, it's this freeing concept to be able to live not only in gratitude, but also in praising God for the good things that happen in my life and in someone else's life. Third thing we can practice this week is to prioritize your happiness. A really straightforward way I can say this is stay in your lane. Live your life. Don't live someone else's life. Don't look through Facebook and Instagram or TikTok what someone else is doing, how the decisions they're making, the careers they're doing. Don't live their life. Jesus paid too much on the cross for you to live someone else's life. He has your life set up for you to live. And the more we prioritize our happiness, not someone else's or the way they're achieving happiness, the more we're at peace where God has us today. You see, many times we don't show God's love and we don't share God's love with others because we're so frustrated, we're so angry, we're so envious of where God has us today that we don't practice gratitude. That we're just naming all the bad things that happen out there and the bad things close to us. You know, the evil's always out there and we're never grateful for anything because nothing good ever happens to us. And then we become very jealous of when other people are achieving, when other people are moving up in life, when other people are achieving great things. We grow envious. We don't celebrate. We pretend to celebrate, but we don't really mean to celebrate, which leads us to live an unhappy life. We want to live somebody else's life, and we're always moving lanes to other people's lanes and getting in their way, and they're getting in our way because we're not staying in the lane that God placed us. Contentment and joy and love only come out of living a life of gratitude, of being able to celebrate the good things that God does, and by prioritizing our happiness above somebody else's happiness. This is something that we can try this week, that you can put in practice today, and I know that God will work through that to give you the heart and life that you've always wanted, to give you not a troubled heart, but a lightened heart, a heart full of joy and freedom to live out your life. So maybe today, as you're thinking about all these things, and all these things are kind of swirling in your mind and in your heart, maybe God is showing you or telling you something today. Maybe it's that next step to release an emotion that's kind of been controlling your life and your heart. Maybe it's a relationship that's been damaged due to envy or jealousy, that today's a good step to step forward and acknowledge the pain you've caused. Or maybe today you just need to take that next step toward Jesus and say, Jesus, I need you to take over my heart because I'm seeing all the bad things that are coming out of my heart, and I don't want to have this bad heart. I want to have a good heart. Maybe your decision today is to let go of that heart and allow God to give you a new one. As the worship team comes up and begins to lead us into this next song, I want you to take this moment to meditate, to connect with God, and to take that step forward. I'm going to come back and have a prayer towards the end of the song for you, and just asking God to lead your life and to give you a heart full of joy and remove that troubled heart from your life right now.